Thank you. Hello, dear audience. I am pleased to be here in front of you and tell you a little bit about the possibilities that fermentation brings to the food industry. We have heard so many times today that we need disruption in the food industry, and I just wanted to bring out the reason that there will be 12 billion people living on Earth by 2100. And all these people need to eat protein. They cannot not eat protein. So how will we feed them if production of meat and dairy is already depleting Earth's natural resources? As a result, there has been a tremendous increase in dairy alternative production in the recent years. Now, I am going to say 3 statements, and I ask you to raise your hands if you agree with the statement. So the statement number 1, do you agree that the plant-based drinks have the same flavor as cow's milk? So who agrees with this statement? I just see 1 hand. Anyone else doesn't agree with the statement? 2 hands, okay. The statement number 2, listen carefully, that the plant-based drinks are nutritionally equal to milk. Who thinks that the plant-based drinks are nutritionally equal to milk? 1, 2 hands, 3. So just 3 people agree with the statement? Maybe 4, okay. 5, okay. You're just so shy, or you really disagree? I'm actually happy that most of you didn't raise your hands, because in fact, plant-based drinks are different than cow's milk. I can say that one is better than the other, but they're simply different. And for example, in Australia, it is forbidden to completely replace milk with plant-based drinks for children under than 3 years old, for the same reason. And the statement number 3, who agrees that the plant-based cheeses are stretchy and the plant-based yogurts are creamy? Please raise your hands. Maybe like 5, 6, 7 people. And you're already here. You are the more educated audience. And sadly, most of you don't agree with these statements. So we see that there is indeed problems. Although the plant-based dairy industry has done a very good job, but there's still a long way to convince the majority of the consumers. Because the plant-based drinks, they have off flavors. Sadly, many of them do. They have the problems with texture and price. So where does the molecular biology and biotechnology come into play? These are 2 technologies that have been used for producing food molecules for decades. And these are molecules that are originally difficult to source or are very high in price. For example, in medicine industry, like antibiotics, or also enzymes like rennet that we use for making our cheese. However, now is the first time in the history when these technologies have become cheap enough for producing also food ingredients. As an example, I have brought out the graph for the price of DNA sequencing, which is a crucial part for molecular biology. And we can see that the price has decreased more than 10,000 times with the past 20 years. You heard me right, 10,000 times. So now, yeah, we can make food ingredients as well. But now, on to the point. Have you ever wondered why the plant-based drinks are so common, but everybody is still dreaming about a good plant-based cheese? There's one unique functional ingredient that in dairy that's not existent in plants, and because of that reason, it is challenging to create equal analogues in plants. That's the reason why the plant-based alternatives often lack the texture and have off flavors. But the good news is that casein comprises only 3.3% of milk. So we can transform the dairy industry by replacing only the functional ingredient that provides the texture and nutrition, and that's only 3% of the milk. And that's exactly what ProProtein does. We are developing a technology for producing the functional ingredient, the caseins, without the need for cattle farming. And we do this by introducing the casein-expressing genes into a yeast genome. Well, DNA, it's like a language or like a code in programming. So we give this information to the same yeast that you would use for brewing beer or making bread. But now, while the yeast is doing its yeast things, it also produces the casein protein. And we can purify it and will obtain a casein protein powder. As I mentioned, the dairy is a very good application for this kind of ingredient, especially hard cheese, because this is facing biggest challenges at the moment. But it can also be used for all other kinds of dairy, especially that products that need texture. For example, sour cream, curd cheese, cottage cheese, and yogurt. But the technology goes even beyond dairy. It can be used as a texturizing ingredient for bakery products or meat alternatives. And also a confectionery industry can benefit from the caseins, for example, making milk chocolate or caramel candies. And the applications go even beyond food industry, also printing paint and adhesives rely on caseins. I wanted to show a little bit where the innovation is coming from. So here in this map are listed all countries that have businesses active in precision fermentation of dairy proteins. They can be whey or casein. Maybe you know that there are two different types of proteins in milk, whey and casein. And the first company was founded in 2014 in the United States, The Perfect Day. And now, 8 years later, there are probably more than 25 companies. I have already lost counting. What I wanted to say with this is that this industry is booming, and there will be more and more companies emerging. A few words about ProProtein as well. We were founded almost 2 years ago, and as a startup, we have been through many programs like Beamline Beta in Estonia. We were finalists in the Rethink Protein Challenge in Netherlands, and last autumn we were busy in ProVeg Incubator. Divya, who you saw previously on the stage, was our mentor. I was very happy to meet her today in real life for the first time. And also, research-wise, we are doing collaboration with University of Tartu, where we work on our yeast strain optimization. And we have been funded by Sustainable Food Ventures and some other angel investors, as well as some grants from Enterprise Estonia. But I also wanted to bring out some bottlenecks. As every young industry, we are also suffering in some growth pains. And the first pain is lack of finances. We know that Estonian investors like to invest into IT. Everybody knows what it is, and it brings fast revenues. But not so many people understand what biotechnology is. And when the investors hear that they will get their revenue in 10 years, they will lose their interest mostly completely. So there are also governments who support their biotechnology industry. As Mari-Liis previously mentioned, then Netherlands allocated 60 million to support their cultivated meat industries, which is great. But then there are other countries where the government hardly supports their biotechnology. And unfortunately, Estonia is the second one. So my advice would be that governments have to make the supporting sustainable and innovative ideas their priority. There's also lack of laboratory spaces for the young startups because they need very specific equipment. And lack of specialists in molecular biology. These technologies are growing so fast that all the specialists are already employed. So if you want to have a good specialist, you have to really look for it for a long time. And then there is this EU novel food legislation. Some of you may know what it is. Basically, it means that any food that hasn't been used in European Union in a significant amount before 1997 has to pass through a novel food legislation. Or if it's produced in a novel way, it also has to do that. And it takes at least 18 months. And it's also very resource intensive. It costs a lot of money. So it gives us disadvantage for launching new products, for example, when compared to United States. And then maybe one of the biggest problem for the future is the bottleneck for production facilities. Since there are biotechnology companies emerging in different kinds of molecule industries, not only milk ingredients, and all of them want to produce somewhere. So if you're looking for a business idea, I advise you to build a production facility. It's a very good investment. But to end on a bit more positive note, I also want to bring out the solutions. And as I mentioned previously, support from the government would be very helpful for the biotechnology to help the startups through the post-initial level, because currently we can get funding from the incubators that are meant for either the very beginning or in the commercial stage. But for biotechnology, there are a few years gap between these two stages. And then the major players in the food industry are big corporations. They want to innovate, but sadly in these big companies, innovation often takes years. They're like big cargo vessels that are difficult to navigate. And at the same time, there are brilliant minds who have bright ideas and want to change the world. And these people found startups, and they are like agile motorboats. So how will we make them benefit from both of them? That the corporations and startups should collaborate. And this can be firstly through financial support. It can be through offering the laboratory, pilot production, and even production spaces, and also co-development of products. And lastly, I would like to mention one of the most thought-provoking books I've read recently. It's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, written by Yuval Noah Harari. And in his books, he emphasizes that the two technologies that will be leading the 21st century are artificial intelligence and biotechnology. And he also says that the countries that will be successful in those will ultimately obtain the power. So let's be one of those powerful countries and support our biotechnology. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaisa, for your interesting presentation. I can't wait for you to overcome the bottlenecks so we can try those non-animal dairy products. Okay. We already had a question during your presentation, but you somewhat answered. Does ProProtein casein is it already available in the market, and what are your volumes?
We are not, unfortunately, yet in the market. As I mentioned, the biotechnology development takes years, and we are around 2 years from launching our product. Mm-hmm. So yes, a lot to wait for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How do you plan to stand out among the tens of startups working on the same solution?
I have heard this question so many times. First of all, we are targeting B2B sector, so we are not aiming to build our own brand, but to scale our impact, we want to supply the big food industry players with our ingredient. But my other thought is that actually I don't see this big competition necessarily as a disadvantage. I think there's still much more space for many more competitors because just 30 companies cannot supply the demand for the whole world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. And as also Katre mentioned in the morning, competition helps you produce even better products in the end for the customers. So.
Exactly, yes, I agree with that.
Okay. You mentioned that one of the bottlenecks is the lack of laboratory partners. Do you have any partners in Estonia at the moment?
Yes, our co-founder is from University of Tartu, and she's currently conducting the research in her laboratory.
Okay, cool. And you also mentioned that you're going to the business-to-business route. So do you already have any companies that are interested in your product?
It's actually like a bit of sad reverse thing that there are actually around 20 companies or even more who have contacted us and said that they want our product, But we are like, sorry, you have to wait a couple of years. We can't give it right now.
Okay, well, that's promising at least. Like it's a nice future ahead at least. Okay, thank you for your answers, and you can now enjoy the last bits of the conference.
Thank you. I wish you the pleasant end of the conference.